To all of you. We are really glad that you're joining us at our online discussion about the handbook for digital media entrepreneurs, which has been launched 2 weeks ago by dw-akademie. My name is Pauline Tillman. I'm project manager and I work together with amazing people on this publication. One of them was Ira Martins-Edwards, who will say some words in a minute about the idea and the approach of the handbook. Ira was one of the 3 main editors together with me and also with Prue Clark. And Prue is also today one of our speakers. She will give an overview of the challenges digital startups are facing and the exciting results and key messages of the handbook. And in her normal life, Prue is Senior Executive Officer at the Judith Nelson Institute for Journalism and Ideas in Sydney, Australia. And we are really glad that you're joining us today, Prue. Welcome.
Thank you.
And our second speaker is Laura Sommer. She applied as one of the authors of the handbook and wrote together with her colleague Anna Paula Valacco, who is also joining us today, a chapter about sustainable media startups in Latin America and their recipe for success. Laura is Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief at Chequeado, the first fact-checking and verification initiative in Latin America. We are really glad having you too, Laura. Welcome. And in the next 30 minutes, we will have a short introduction by Ira, then a presentation by Prue Clark. Laura Sommer will be speaking about 10 minutes, and afterwards we will have time for Q&A. So there will be about 25 minutes for your questions. If you do have any questions, please write them into the chat box and we will go through them afterwards. And really important is that the session will be recorded. And as you see, we are right now also live on YouTube. So just for your background. And now, Ira, this is your stage.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pauline. Welcome to everyone again from my side and from Deutsche Welle Academy. I am going to share my screen now, and I hope this is going to work. It worked before, so you should be able to see this.
Yes.
I'm just missing the sign now for full screen. Give me 1 second. Something always I guess sometimes always has to go wrong. If it's just this, I guess we'll be okay. I'm just going to do it like that. Yeah, I will take a few minutes to talk a little bit about the background of the handbook, what was our idea and how did we go about that. From Start to Success is a practical guide. It's a handbook for digital media entrepreneurs from around the world. It takes on the perspective of media startups from the global south, so to speak, and it's been produced from startups by startups, which we believe makes it very unique and hopefully also very helpful and useful for all of you participating here today and even more people around the world. So what was our aim and approach? This is the handbook, and we decided to take a 3-step approach. What does that mean? This means that we look first of all at the start phase in chapter 1. So the founding phase, when media startups set out to launch and initiate their own ideas and ventures. And then we look at the growth phase in chapter number 2. So what happens if you grow, also maybe sometimes unexpectedly, you have to deal with unexpected funding coming in, you have to deal with unexpected organizational issues, staffing issues. These are topics that we're looking at in chapter number 2. And in chapter number 3, we decided to put a focus on the media viability phase. And what does that mean? I would like to quickly talk a little bit about the concept of media viability, because it's a very important concept that we use and we developed at Deutsche Welle Academy. Our slogan is media viability is more than money. And that means that we consider media viability as the ability of media organizations to produce high quality journalistic content but in a sustainable way. So we're not just looking at economic aspects, but we're also looking at political contexts. We're looking at the community, the audience. We're looking at technological infrastructure. And as I mentioned, the content, the independent journalistic content. The media users are very much at the center of this model. That's very important to consider. And it's also a three-level approach. So apart from looking at the media outlets, what we try to do is we also look at the networks. So we're trying to look outwards, the networks and the contexts that the media outlets, the organizations find themselves in, and the overall environment, the landscape that they find themselves in. So this is media viability at DW Academy. And now probably the more important question regarding the publication is what makes this publication special? What we did is we tried to provide a cross-regional study. So we picked 3 geographical regions. When we, in the beginning, looked at what sort of books, publications, studies are out there, we realized that most publications and handbooks focus on one specific region. There's a lot of really, really good stuff coming out, especially out of Latin America, but we wanted to do that step further and include different regions. We also wanted to produce something with a south to south focus. So as you can see here, our team of authors, they are all founders themselves. Laura Sommer and Ana Paula Valaco, work for Chequeado. Kirsten Hahn on the right side, who work together on chapter number 2, comes from New Narrative, a startup in Singapore, and Hanan Suleiman focused on the MENA region in the center here, and she's also a founder herself. So all in all, we covered 21 startups. We interviewed 21 startups from a total of 18 different countries. And we think that makes this publication very special and hopefully useful to you as well. And on a last note, I would like to tell you the main topics that we looked at. So in the sense of media viability, we did not just look at funding and revenue streams, but we also put a big emphasis on looking at organizational issues and staffing issues. So how do you manage your organization? How do you improve your business in that respect? How do you treat your staff well? How do you find your staff and how do you keep them? And thirdly, another very big topic we tried to cover is membership and community building. So looking at the audience and how you can actually strengthen your relationships with the audience, which is probably a topic that has become even more important in COVID-19 times. And now I would already like to pass back to Pauline and then Prue to tell you more about the actual results and the stories that this handbook covers.
Thank you very much, Ira, for the short introduction. I would like to invite Prue to talk to us. She would like to tell you more about the challenges that digital media startups are facing and also the key learnings and results and recommendations of the handbook. So Prue, this is your stage.
Thank you so much, Paulina. And can I just start by saying what a thrill it was for me to work on this. So I'm so grateful to Ira and Paulina and Hannah and the Deutsche Welle team for asking me to work on this and for the important work you do, which I'm always saying is really driven by listening to people on the ground, which we appreciate. And I think this handbook is such a great example of this, you know, written by Laura, Kristen, Paulina, Hannah, and Ana Paula, people who are on the front lines and really know what questions to ask, rather than having somebody from an idealistic setting asking. And look, for me, it was so enlightening to see this cross-section, all of these digital startups across the world working together and to just get an understanding of the landscape. And I think everyone will find it really helpful to see what's been going on, what's been tried, what's worked and what's failed. I want to thank the interviewees for their time and their candor. Not something you see that often in the competitive media environment, but you really get a sense the camaraderie that there is among digital startups across the world in this handbook. I've been so heartened to see that over the last year that I've been working in Asia and seeing the ecosystem here, obviously coalescing around Splice and Alan and Richard, who really model transparency and encouragement and camaraderie that I think is the engine of the innovation and experimentation in this ecosystem, and that is supported by great international partners. And I should point out that just to give their time for these interviews was extraordinary in the first place. I mean, everyone who's done it knows that running a startup is hard work, especially given the huge financial struggles they're facing, but many of them are also facing legal struggles. And I will highlight that 3 of the media houses the interviewees, Maria Ressa, Steve Garn of Malaysia Kini, and Lena Atala, are all facing legal battles as we speak, just trying to keep out of jail. So I wanted to say that, look, of course, it's no surprise that media in the global south should be breaking new ground. It's never been about the money. Brave, smart, driven journalists will always find a way to tell their fellow citizens what's going on and to help them get justice and accountability. The internet has given them new tools and broader reach, and they're taking advantage of that. As many of you know, I jumped into this startup train more than a decade ago in West Africa after working as a journalist and a trainer with other media development organizations there. I worked in newsrooms and in Ghana and then Liberia. And I will never forget the first time I was handed a brown envelope. And it's called different things in different parts of the world, but you all know what I mean. I was basically given a fat packet of cash by a UN agency to cover the press conference that they just held. Now, I came to understand that this was how journalists made their income, that they made almost nothing from their employer, because the newsrooms expected them to take payments from aid groups and government officials they were covering. And I've since learned that this is true across the global south and sadly creeping into the global north as well. And it's sort of a secret that no one talks about, but it became very clear to me early on that these journalists didn't need to know how to report independently. They needed the money to report independently, and it was all about the business model. So way back in 2007, I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Where's my PowerPoint gone? Disappeared. Okay, here we go. I met this guy, whose name is Rodney Sear. He was one of the first African journalists to start a website in exile called Front Page Africa. And Rodney and I decided that we'd set up a non-profit newsroom called New Narratives that could take all of that donor money that was being spent on what we thought were fairly useless workshops and channel it to where it was needed, which was the reporting. And we've been lucky to have found a range of donors over the years who are willing to do things differently from the traditional workshop model and have supported us at the same time as they've had real impact in their own causes. And I know this is a model that some of the media houses in this handbook have adopted as well, including The Reporter in Taiwan. And this is the sort of stories that we started to do. So teen mothers, a third of teenage girls in Liberia were pregnant before they were 18, with dramatic impacts for the society, of course. No one was paying for these stories to be covered, but we were able to take donor dollars and help Front Page Africa to tell those stories. And there's, sorry, that's just the front page of our website. The stories in this handbook highlight the innovative, exciting, and sometimes simple experiments that have been going on in low and middle income markets for a decade. Many have sold services, training, data analysis, investigations, content creation to fund their journalism. SOUT, for instance, became the first major podcast producer in the Arab region. Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism partners with international media houses to do investigative reporting done from the region by Arab reporters. This has been a particularly lucrative option in the MENA region for the moment, where many NGOs and donors in the region are interested in supporting reporting because of the conflict that's going on there. In the middle income countries of Asia, there has been a greater focus on membership models. In Myanmar, Myanmar Frontier has tapped the lucrative expat and academic community that is willing to pay $100 a year for information that they can't get elsewhere. And Hong Kong Free Press has had success with crowdfunding, similar to the voluntary contribution scheme that's really driving The Guardian. And I'll let Lara talk more about Latin America. I wanted to highlight for those of you who didn't see that I was pleased to see that Ben Smith, the New York Times media columnist, conceded recently that in fact media houses, the global north, have a lot to learn from the global south. And he wrote that after having hosted Maria Ressa of Rappler and Steve Garn of Malaysia Kini in his offices in BuzzFeed, where he was the long-time founding editor, it pretty soon, they were there to seek his advice, and it pretty soon became clear to him that in fact he should have been seeking their advice. He wrote, they had, on shoestring budgets and in the face of unrestrained government pressure, created the kind of mission-driven, scrappy and successful news sites that American startups dreamed of becoming. And he acknowledges Malaysia Kini had built a sort of robust subscription model that everyone in the US is now trying to generate. And that in 2018, when a government crackdown cut Rappler's advertising revenue by 1/3 in 1 month, the company looked to see what else they could do and what other services they had and they could sell, and they began doing data analysis for companies to keep themselves afloat. Now, enlightened donors have been a big part of the mix in all of these regions, but most media houses in this handbook have understood that donors are not dependable long-term and can steer media businesses off its mission. And in places like the Middle East, it's been very difficult to take donor money at all. So media investors there, like media organizations there, like Daraj and Sout, forgive my terrible pronunciations, have known from day one that they needed a robust business plan to make things work long term. I came away from this project wishing there were more enlightened investors. That seems to be a key area of difference with rich, stable democracies like the US or Germany, where investors have funded experiments and innovation at Vice, Vox, BuzzFeed, and others. Even if you are able to find an investor who's enlightened in a lot of these markets and who understands the importance of media and are willing to take a financial risk, they will likely not want to suffer the blow to their business that comes from crossing the government. And of course, that was the hard lesson that billionaire Jimmy Lai learned at Apple Daily in Hong Kong when he was forced to choose between his media businesses and his clothing empire. So the takeaways, back to my screen again, the main takeaways, really summing this up in really four points. There are so many more for you to delve into in this handbook. But I think the number one takeaway from all of these stories is that a successful startup must listen to its audience. Gone are the days when a media house can just tell the audience what they want and expect them to tune in and rake in the money from advertising. And Sunny Sway from Myanmar Frontier talked about this week in Spike's Beta about how he madly focus grouped to start his membership model. And sorry, I just wanted to point out that, you know, I'm an old school journalist, and I confess I was slow to understand what this means. What listening to your audience does not mean dumbing down your news and covering more gossip. It does mean listening to your audience about how they want their news, where, when, and in what format. And you must engage with them and make them understand that you are not taking them for granted, and make them think and understand that this is your product is an essential service in their lives that they can't live without. Sadly, that means that there's no blueprint for success that we can just hand you and pass around. Every media organization, every market, every product is different. So the formula that worked for Animal Politico in Mexico may not work for Pratchett Thai and may not work for Racif 22. But there are some ideas that may work, and I urge everyone to study these pages and think about how these ideas may work for you. And the second major takeaway is that your journalism must be stellar, honest, trustworthy, reliable, and thorough. Interviewees constantly told us that when they took their eyes off the journalism, which is easy to do when you're building a business and you're not used to that, everything else suffered. When quality journalism is your brand, you must protect it. You must be careful that your new revenue streams do not damage your brand, or you will lose your audience and have nothing left. Third, embrace technology. Maria Ressa often says that the digital platforms made the problem and only they can fix it. You need to understand the tools, learn how to use the tools to reach new audiences and monetize them. Look to technology such as podcasts, newsletters, and other ideas about new ways to reach your audience and raise new revenue streams. And as Ira mentioned, a big one about finding staff who are on the same wavelength. Many of the interviewees found that this startup, scrappy, innovative, entrepreneurial mindset did not suit old-time journalists who just couldn't get on the same page. It was also a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of journalists that they were not very good at running businesses and that they needed to learn to really value business managers and marketing experts, and then to really understand what they need. And so Magdalene in Indonesia told us to hire slowly and fire fast. So if someone's not working out, let them go, but think long and hard about who you need, because staff is key to the business. So it's a brutal time for media around the world. And as everybody knows, advertisers and audiences have less money to spend. And as populist leaders take advantage of the chaos and mistrust created by disinformation that is flooding information ecosystems. We need new laws, leaders who understand the challenges, smart investors and enlightened donors to win this fight long term. But in the short term, there are lots of things that media houses can do to build their financial stability, to reach new audiences, and to ensure their stability for at least the short term. And this handbook is chock full of ideas, and I hope you find it as enlightening as I did. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prue, for your insights and your summary. And before we are coming to Lara Sommer, who's based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, I just want to take the question which has occurred in the chat box. I encouraged you to write your questions in the chat box, and we will talk about them after the presentations. But this is perhaps one that we can quickly answer, Ira. There was this question why we did not talk to startups in the East or West Africa regions. Perhaps, Ira, you can just say 2-3 sentences.
Unfortunately, the answer is very simple. We were also bound to funding restrictions, and we had to decide which regions we can include. That's one side, and the other side is that we had this approach that we wanted to find authors from the Global South. And that was a bit of a challenge in the beginning, because we really wanted to find people who are founders themselves, but who also have the research skills to do these interviews and to systematize the results that we found. Because what the handbook is actually not just anecdotes and case studies. What we try to do is transform this into, package this for you into lesson learned, into key tips, practical tips that you can take away. And we really had to find these people, and we found a wonderful team of authors, but unfortunately, I mean, we would have loved to include a lot more regions. Maybe in the future there will be part 2, part 3, we don't know. But for now we had to limit it regionally. unfortunately, yeah.
And to go one step back, so we had a call for authors, and there were about 20 people who applied, and they had to fulfill this criteria that Ira mentioned right now. And we're super, super glad that we have like Latin America, MENA region, and also Asia. And we have the expertise from Africa with Prue Clark. So this is like the maximum what we could achieve in our imagination. So we hope that this is enough for the moment to get really inspiring insights. And now I would like to give the word to Laura Sommer from Chequeado, who will tell us more about the Latin American startups and their recipe for success.
Hi, how are you, everyone? Thank you for joining this conversation, and thank you to the Deutsche Academy and to Pauline, Hira, and Prune. And thank you also to Ana Paula Balaco, that is in the chat with us and is the co-author of the chapter, and the person with Deborah that made all the interviews. And also thank you for all the directors or editors from the other media that, as Prune said, were really open and kindly, not only to share their success, but also to share that experience that can make others to not make the same mistake in the future. I always repeat that when I start 8 years ago to lead the Chequeado's team, I would love to have this handbook, because there's a lot of mistakes that are exactly the same everywhere. Most of the new media in the digital landscape were run by journalists, like as Prune said, from the old school, trying to move on, because in the traditional media we are not necessarily finding inspiration, not necessarily finding enough freedom, or not necessarily finding a mentor inside the media that we think he or she is doing what we imagine the audience or the public or our society needs. Then what I think this book is good for, and I really encourage everyone to read it and to use it, is that don't necessarily explain we are excellent, we are really good, we are the most martyrs, we are the most incredible people in the world. What the handbook also explains is all the challenge we have to face every day. And I think that also important to repeat it and to talk about it and to know more about it. And then that's one of my biggest recommendation for the audience. Read it and also learn from the things that we did bad or not necessarily well in the past. I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm not going to explain all the incredible media in Latin America that we interview and we explain more in detail in the chapter 3 of the book, but I'm gonna pick some of them just to you to know if things go.
Sure.
We're gonna try. No. Wait. When we tried before we start, everything was excellent. Do you want Pauline to share it for me?
Sure.
I can't do it.
You can't do it. Okay, wait a minute. Then just you can start, and I look for the presentation that you sent me, and we'll show it. Okay.
Okay. Then the challenge or the invitation for the chapter was we wanted to analyze what is the golden recipe that has helped this incredible media to drive and reach viability. And I'm not necessarily have good news for you, because the spoiler alert said that there's nothing similar to a unique recipe. as we said some minutes ago. But we are sure that there are some lessons from others that can help you to think your own media, your own model that works for you, for your country in that exactly moment where you are challenging or a new media or a media that need to grow to survive. How was the process of the chapter? We made some semi-structured interviews with media leaders. We review literature, and I always, every time that I have the chance, I repeat it. There's not many literature about media or digital media in the region, in Latin America. We need much more. And then we review that literature. That is not a lot, but it is some of them. Some of the colleagues from Sembra Media that are joining us and they are in the chat are working on that for a while, from some years. Then that's good to have. Next one, Pauline. And our own experience from these 10 years of chequeado also was really useful for us. And as Brun said, also for us, the questions that are not necessarily that questions that everyone asks, because we focus on some practical issues or some practical challenges, and not just the incredible ideas that we have in our mind because of our mission, or we also focus on the day-by-day problems that we have. Next one, please. One of the media that we love and Prun mentioned is Animal Politico from Mexico. The pictures that you're gonna see in my presentation are the person we interview. They are not necessarily always the founder or the director. In the case of Tania, she's the editor-in-chief now. Animal Politico was founded by Daniel Moreno in 2010. They focus on investigative journalists, but they have different verticals, content that allowed us to earn money and to keep some money from that verticals to invest in deep journalists. They found a way to do that. They born like a Twitter account, and after they grow a strong community, they move on to a digital media more as we know today. And one of the key questions that Tania repeat us is involving citizens in the whole journalist process is what allowed us to work with them. And that's a key point that a lot of people repeat when we are talking about listen to the audience, and Prud said that also. It's not just ask the audience to share your content. When we are talking about listen to the audience, we are talking about a relationship much more strong in terms of what we are asking them to do with us. What Tania explained us also is that when you have that community that is more involved, obviously it's more easy to ask them or explain why quality journalists need money to be there, to be strong, to be independent. Next one, please. Then if you don't know Animal Politico and you can read it Spanish or use Google Translate to do it, I super recommend you. La Diaria, it's a completely different model based on the small country from our region, from Uruguay. Damián Ostamatos is one of the founders. They is the only media that we interviewed that made daily news coverage in a more known way, but they are focusing also in human rights, and they have an editorial position clear on the center left of the country. And they start before they start, they've got money from the people or the readers. They want that newspaper to born in that country. What the La Diaria story showed us is that they were not just journalists wanting to do what they have on mind. They were journalists pointing to a need or to ask from the public or from that society that wanted to have a better media with that perspective on the ground. And what Damian pointed us is traditional and unidirectional journalists, and he used all the time this concept, can be also enriched by people with the audience. And what he said related to, we have in the audience experts from all our research, from all our articles, the old sources that we look for now because of internet and the social networks out there. We have to have the chance to be there. And the other one is HECA.
I think we have to go to chequeado and then come to the learnings.
The releases. Okay, then chequeado, perhaps some of you know it, is based in Argentina, founded in 2010, and we are focused on fact-checking, verification, and what we call transparent journalists, because we have transparent our methodology, our staff, our financial since the beginning. And one of the main reasons of our growth related to what Prum said is that we realize sooner than later that the technology were our ally and the product were one of the most important things to focus on. And then what Pablo is pointing, Pablo is the innovation director. What he said is it's a good practice to take the time to reflect on your products and to establish the better way to strengthen the opportunity they provide. Is sometimes the journalists believe that the products that we love from our cell phone are the first version of the product. And obviously when you read more about it, sometimes it's, I don't know, the 100 version of that app. And what we should do more being journalists is separate the time and also the money to refresh the products, listen to the audience after we launch it. And that is not necessarily a practice that we do a lot. And then the last is perhaps the most important slide for you. That is what are our lessons learned. Embrace your mission, and that makes what makes your media necessary. What I told you about La Diaria in Uruguay, it's exactly what we think when we say embrace your mission and stay there, and think about what you are necessary and needed for your audience. The other lesson learned from this day but they work is you need rules and process. And the early you do it is simpler, because when you grow, it is much more complex, your structure and your decision needs and the time you need that decisions, then adopt your rules when you are starting and not when you are already 20 people working with you. Open and honest conversation with your audience, always. One of the things that we listen from all the colleagues is that perhaps the old school journalists believe that the audience don't accept our mistakes. And on the contrary, the audience accepts our mistake when we talk to them transparent. Then we are humans, obviously, and we have mistakes, and the important is to be transparent with the people when we made that. Support your staff. Your team, as Prun said, is your main asset, and help them to grow and also be there every time they need it. And this is also a lesson learned from a lot of us, because as journalists, we are all the time doing things and not necessarily taking enough care of our teams. and there's a lot of newsrooms burnout with the staff burnout, and then this is a important issue to take care about it before you have that problems or that situation inside your staff. And diversify your funding. All the models that we mentioned in the 8 media that we interview don't have all the eggs in the same basket. All of them decide to have diversity of ways to earn the money for the quality and good journalists. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you for this interesting presentation. And of course, we could talk a little much more about the startups in Latin America, but we would encourage you to read the handbook and to get to know them better. So we have some questions, right, Ira, in the chat box from the participants of our online discussion. And also Hanan is joining us, who wrote the chapter 1 and interviewed startups from the MENA region. So Ira, do you want to ask some of the questions?
Welcome, Hanan. Yeah, I have a few questions here, and one question I find really interesting I would like to pick up and pose to you. It's from a Zimbabwean journalist who is currently working in Lesotho, and he just ventured to start his own newspaper project after working in the print media for 25 years. And he would like to know more on how he can transform into the new digital realm quicker and more effectively. And I find that question really interesting because we're talking a lot about steps, and the question is how quickly can you transform and how quickly can you set up a startup, and how much time do you have to take for which core steps that you have to take. Maybe Prue and Laura, you have some ideas, and also Paulina is a founder herself, so I'm not, so I pose the question to the rest of the panel.
I would say just quickly, it depends on you. Most people have taught themselves this technology or picked things up along the way, and it definitely, if you have access to training opportunities, then you should take them. But otherwise, it's really a matter of trying to find the opportunities to learn using social media and read this handbook. I think it's really, when you look at Animal Politico and understand that they really did just start as a Twitter account, it shows that anybody can enter this new world, build an audience, and go from there. So maybe that's a good way to start.
And perhaps also Prue to you, Laura. Okay, go on.
No, go. just a short then
sure.
Question is perhaps the most important thing is not to believe that you are going to move the media from paper to digital. You just to think about a new one, perhaps with the same principles that you want to have or want to focus on. But it's not that moving to the digital landscape is necessary doing the same in the same way. Then you are not necessarily the expert on that. One of the most important things is to find good people to work and to do a team with. And that people perhaps should be different from you, and have another skills that you don't have. That's perhaps my recommendation. Look for a good team, just to think about a product you are imagining. And after you have that, then go to the word.
Okay, we got also a question by email, perhaps Prue to you, because it's especially on concerning South Africa. So the question is, are there any funding mechanisms for digital media projects in Southern Africa? And if so, how can one apply for assistance? Do you have an idea?
So I'm focused on West Africa, but there are opportunities. There's, you know, if you're going to be anywhere in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa and find opportunities available, you're in the best place, because most of them are coming out of South Africa. I mean, MDIF has a great program there, but it's for more established media. But they're there, and I'm sorry I don't have a list to give you right now, but they're definitely there, and it shouldn't take too much effort to find them. I would go to places like the African Investigative Journalism Conference is coming up next month. You'll find lots of opportunities there. To the Zimbabwean journalist, one great example of a new digital startup is in Zimbabwe called Chat263. That's a really good place to see digital media startups and learn from them. Daily Maverick is another great example. So there's a lot going on in your part of the world.
And there was also this question by Martin from Tanzania. Ira, do you want to ask a question?
He's particularly interested in the role of the Digital Media Lab on supporting the digital media startups, and if they're effective in creating sustainable ecosystem. I'm not 100% sure if you're referring to Media Labs Tech, the hub that we also mentioned in the handbook.
Or in general, probably.
In general, I'm guessing so generally you're asking about the role of labs and hubs to support digital media startups, and if they're successfully creating ecosystems for new media organizations.
So Benoit is also joining us, right? Perhaps you can answer this question if you want.
I think Benoit.
Unmute you.
No.
Oh, she's not able. Okay.
No.
So according to your experience, Laura, what do you think? Are hubs or media labs effective in creating sustainable ecosystems or helping startups to be viable in the future?
In general, my point of view is always open to receive from anyone that want to help you the advice they can give you. That don't necessarily make you be a successful media. We know from our own experience in Latin America some failures from hubs that tried to make media, and that media didn't survive. But my recommendation is always useful if you are a journalist or a researcher trying to do a new media, to listen to people that came from marketing or from the entrepreneurs sector or financial and so on, and staffing. And then in general, that type of hubs give you that. They are not necessarily going to help you on how to do your journalist part of your work. But what all the executive director and the leaders we interview for the book also tell us is that when you are leading a media, you are just a small part of your work doing what we know as journalists. We also do a lot of stuff that is not necessarily journalist, but it's more managing or something like that. Then in general, it's useful to have some advice on that.
There's a few more questions coming in. I'm looking at the time, but I would like to pick up one more question that's actually touching on the topic of membership, I think. Someone's asking, I recently worked with an Eastern European outlet whose CMS ranks stories on clicks. These downplay real listening. Did you come across good, affordable tools and technologies that small startups can use to listen more effectively or efficiently to their audiences? Or tricks, maybe not necessarily tools, but some tips. How do you do it?
My recommendation is, because we arrive there later, or not necessarily at the beginning, is find ways to know better your audience. It's just if you know, not exactly, but you know who your audience is, you're going to find a good tool to listen to them. Sometimes is invite a group of people that want to join you once a month just to criticize your products or to criticize what subject you are not necessarily focused on and they want to. But one of the problems that we have, and I talked to that to Pauline last month, is that when you start a media, your audience is in general similar to you because you are making a product that you love. And when you grow, your audience is not necessarily you, not your friends, not your colleagues. And then find a way to pick up that in the correct time is important. Then you can do regular surveys in the social network to ask people about your columns or your subjects or the way you are presenting your I don't know, information or your products. All that type of things can help you, and also know from the beginning that you are not necessarily listen everyone all the time, because that's impossible. Then just try experiment with some, and if that didn't work, change it, and that's okay. It's part of our work.
So there was also a question concerning Google Ads and other revenue streams. Of course, we can right now not talk in about 2 minutes what are all the alternative revenue streams for digital media startups, but there are about 5 minutes left for our online discussion. And Hannah was so kind to write the email address into the chat box. So if you do have any questions, you can also write them to us directly, but perhaps directly to Prue, the question, we wanted to help especially startups in developing countries and emerging markets with this handbook. But do you think that this publication might also be interesting for media outlets, let's say in the global north?
Absolutely. Australia has been blessed with 30 years of economic growth. We were one of the only countries that skated over the global financial crisis. But I think the downside has been that the media here didn't face that extinction event that a lot of media houses faced elsewhere. And so they are still somewhat dependent on the advertising model, especially in regional Australia. And so we've seen since March, in this first recession, more than 200 media houses shut down, and that's in a country of 25 million people. So it's a lot. And we're just not seeing the same sort of innovation and same experimentation that I saw in these handbooks. The global north is not great at thinking they have anything to learn from global south. But I was very struck in this at how much media, even just in my own backyard, has to learn from this. So yes, I hope that there is some humility that we saw from Ben Smith of the New York Times. If he thought he had something to learn from Asian media startups, then I think that certainly every other media house in the global north does.
Okay, thank you very much, Prue. So Ira, should we take another question or come slowly to an end? What do you think?
There's a lot more questions, but I think unfortunately there are complex questions, and I think we really hope that you read the handbook and you find both the strategic guidance, the tips, but also inspiration in that handbook. Download is for free. We have the translation in the pipeline for Spanish and Arabic. Very excited about that. And yeah, I would just like to use the chance again to thank you, Prue and Laura from Deutsche Welle Academy, and also Pauline. who's had a triple role in this, editor, author, and also project manager of a network of media startups from around the world. And please contact us with your feedback, your questions. As I said, we would like to keep working with you and with startups from all around the globe. So thank you very much from my side. And also thank you to Pauline for your moderation.
Thank you for your co-facilitation, Ira, and thank you very much to Hannah, our project assistant, for the technical support in the background. We hope that you enjoyed our online discussion today, and we will have another discussion next week with Ira and with Kirsten Hahn talking about the handbook. So if there were questions left, just join us next.